Well, hello again, everyone. Today we're going to look at a new and exciting chord that opens up all sorts of chromatic possibilities, and it's rooted in the idea of borrowing a chromatic, but this time not necessarily from the parallel mode. We need to think perhaps more in terms of Phrygian, because it features a certain scale degree that is not within our normal major-minor system. So we start out with this nice little two-bar progression you see up here, and I've repeated it thrice with a couple of minor adaptations. We'll talk about that as we go along here. But it's 1, 2, 6, 5, 1. 2 diminished 6, because we're in minor. 5, 1 is as pedestrian and normal as you can get. Let's give it a listen, just so we have the sound in our ear. Pretty straight ahead stuff. In the 1 to 2, 6, note the doubling. We've doubled the third of the diminished chord, common move. We don't have any other serious voice leading issues to worry about. Notice how we come out of the 2 diminished 6 into the 5. Contrary motion against the bass to avoid parallels. Have to remember to raise the leading tone because we are in a minor key, and it resolves out to the initial voicing. Pretty standard, really. The premise that I wish to speak of is the idea of the lowered second scale degree. So to that end, what is the second scale degree in the key of B minor? That's right, it is C sharp. So what we need to do is lower that. Now if I'm going to lower a sharp, I make it, that's right, I make it C natural. So let's take a look at the progression again, right here, but I'm going to add something. I'm going to lower this C sharp so it's a C natural. Right, now let's listen to that progression with the alteration. I'm going to add a little courtesy accidental to my tenor here because if you'll notice, even though they're in different voices, C natural versus C sharp, sometimes on the fly, if you're writing these things, it's best to see the courtesy accidental so you remember that, oh, it's supposed to actually be C sharp. Now let's take a look at this chord. What is the quality of this chord now? We got rid of the C sharp, turned into C natural. So what does that make the chord? Well, C, E, G. What kind of triad is that? Yep, it's a major triad. Now notice the doubling is not our normal major triad doubling. Our doubling is usually in a major triad, double the root, double the fifth in a second inversion situation. And the third is a less likely choice to double because it tends to want to move to 4 in most situations. But in this case, doubling the third is exactly what we're doing because all we did was we took the diminished triad and lowered the root of the diminished triad by a half step. So we want to think of this as being an outgrowth of the 2 diminished 6. But now we have another problem. What kind of chord is this? Well, it's major. If it's major, is that the proper Roman numeral for it? Of course not. So a major triad should look like this. But there's still a problem. What is the problem? The problem is that 2 in the key of B minor is C sharp, and there's not a C sharp in that chord. So you cannot call a chord by something that is not there. You cannot label a chord based on a note that is not present at all. Not only is it not present, a note that would never work with the C sharp in that situation is present. The root has been substituted for something a half step down. So if we want to get very technical, we can do something like this. Let me set a nice font because I like to make it look good. We can call it the flat 2-6 if we want. And that's an appropriate gesture. Even though we didn't flat it, we naturaled it. Overall flat means lower it by a half step. So flat 2-6, lower the chord, lower the root of the chord by a half step. That seems like a pretty straight ahead idea. However, that system is fine, but I think perhaps it would be in our best interest to come up with another name as well. So another term we use for the flat 6 is N6. And N in this case, and this is where it gets a little weird, because N means a variety of different things musically. It can mean the neighbor, as we've seen, or sometimes it's just labeled as a generic non-chord tone. But most of the time we see N and we think neighbor. This is not what's going on here, which is why I like to have flat 2/6 in the back pocket as well. The N in this case means Neapolitan. And to make the joke that every theorist has to make at this point, it does not mean that the chord contains chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry ice cream. The term Neapolitan it's somewhat archaic. There's no evidence that this chord originated in and around Naples. There's no evidence that composers from Naples used the chord more than others. It's just a situation where we have to call it something, and since so much of music theory is historically placed in Western Europe, Germany, France, Italy, we tend to use terms drawn from those areas. So the flat 2/6 is also known as the Neapolitan 6. Let's listen to that again and see if we can hear the majorness of it, why it really stands out. Yeah. Notice the voice leading. The voice leading in the Neapolitan 6 doesn't change from what it was when it was the 2 diminished 6. You still have the doubled third of the chord. The C sharp is now a C natural, but it still responds the same way. It looks weird because you have C natural going to A sharp, and that's a weird leap for us. It looks weird. It's actually just an enharmonic major second. It's a diminished third leap, but downward that is acceptable. E to C sharp. Resist the temptation to go to, well, let me show you the danger zone here. If I do this, and I'll need a courtesy accidental, then I'm going to probably have to do something like this. But I need to remember to sharp it. So something like this. This is wrong. This is dangerous for a couple of reasons. One, you have a little chromatic line here, C natural to C sharp. When you go across a bar line, it's not so bad. But even so, you still want to avoid that. Two, you have a G natural to A sharp in the alto, and that's an augmented second leap upwards, and you never want to allow that sort of motion to happen. And third, we end up with this really weird motion. The temptation is to say, well, I need to double the root, so I'm going to do this, which means you have parallel octaves with the bass and the tenor. So you need to avoid every last one of those things. So let's undo all that. I went too far. Did I go too far? No, I'm good. So in this case, the voice leading, there we go, remains exactly the same as it did from 2 diminished 6 to 5, because the Neapolitan 6 is a chromatic alteration of that. So we are doing some modal mixture here, but it's not from a minor mode, not from the Aeolian mode. Which modes feature the lowered second? There are two that technically feature the lowered second, the Phrygian and the Locrian. And in as much as we still have the regular 5, whereas in the Phrygian would have a lowered, or in the Locrian would have a lowered 5, I think it's safe to say that the Neapolitan is a temporary borrowing from Phrygian. So we're still expanding on the idea of mode mixture, and we're going for that flat second scale degree here. So let's make a note of that so you see that in action. This is the flat. There's just no good way to do this. It's very tedious. By the way, go download if you want the scale degrees times font. It's a good font to have because it puts the carets on the numbers for you. So the C in this case, C natural, is a flat second scale degree. Now, what happens if we have a 5/7 chord? In other words, what if we want to have this. Well, just for consistency's sake, make it look good here. Well, then we need to change one of the voices. We need to pick up the 7th. We still like it. Logically, it would say keep the E here, but then we lose the F sharp, which is a possibility. You could do this. Oops, sorry, wrong layer, finales and all like that. And you just don't have a 5th of the chord, which is acceptable. Another option would be to do something like this. If you want to have a complete dominant chord, move that down to there, and then of course this will affect your voice leading in some other ways as well, because if you have the complete dominant, you need to have the incomplete tonic. But either one of those situations would work. You can either use a maximum sloth to keep the E in the tenor, and you'd end up with the exact same voicing as the original, or you can pull everything down if you want to have the complete 5/7 chord, and then resolve it out to the incomplete tonic with just the tripled root and the 3rd. And again, that would sound something like this. Right, then the bottom one here, we've added the cadential 6/4 to 5/3 in, so I'll put these in here real quick. This is gripping movie making, I know. Okay, so cadential 6/4 to 5/3. That's how the voice leading works when we have a 2 diminished 6 situation. But if I wanted to turn this into the Neapolitan, then I would take the same basic principle in which I lower that. And notice that, once again, the voice leading doesn't actually change. And this might actually be a little smoother if then you want to add a 7th chord in here, because then you could take the E, the F sharp down to an E, and then down to the D here and have the D, C sharp, B in the tenor line. So this is the basic approach to the Neapolitan 6 chord. It's built on the idea of a lowered 2nd scale degree happening in what was normally the space for 2 diminished 6 in a minor key. You can have Neapolitans in major as well, and we'll address some of those situations in class. But when you do have a Neapolitan in the major situation, then it counts as another borrowing from the minor mode, because we normally associate the Neapolitan with the minor mode. So, as always, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, track me down, and have a great day.